A slowed down metabolism is the biggest enemy to everyone that is trying to lose weight. It is also the most common excuse that people tend to use when they cannot manage to reach their weight loss goals. This is why today we're going to examine everything about metabolism that you can think of. I'm going to present to you my few hours of scientific research. All of the studies will be linked down in the description box if you want to read some of them yourself. We're going to cover what metabolism is, what do people refer to as damaged metabolism, does this concept even exist, are people just trying to make excuses, and then we'll move on to some popular strategies such as diet breaks and refeeds with a little bit more focus on refeeds, and finally we'll talk about the only one strategy that has been scientifically proven to actually work. Anyways, let's get right into the video. First off, what is metabolism? Metabolism, or what people refer to as metabolism in the online space, is usually the total daily energy expenditure. This is the amount of energy that one requires each day to perform everything. It consists of a few components. The biggest one, and this is probably the most important one, is the basal metabolic rate. It amounts to around 70% of your total daily energy expenditure, and it is predetermined by a variety of factors that you cannot really change that much. The second biggest determinant of your metabolism is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or this is the amount of energy that your body uses to perform different types of physical activity that are not exercise. So here we're talking you standing up to get some water. We're talking you are going to the bus station. These types of activities. We're even talking you are cleaning the bathroom. Those are things that are not you performing exercise intentionally. This is completely predetermined by your lifestyle. If you're working as a waitress, it would be much higher than it would be for an office job. The third biggest factor would be the thermal effect of food. This is the amount of energy that your body uses to digest the food that you give it. This is entirely dependent on how your food is composed in terms of macronutrients. I'm talking fats, proteins, and carbs. Protein has the highest thermic effect of food, with between 20 and 30% of its energy required for its effective digestion, and for fats and carbohydrates it ranges between 5 and 15% according to Wikipedia. I do remember from other sources that I've seen that for fats it's somewhat lower than that for carbohydrates. And the last factor is the exercise activity thermogenesis. This is the amount of energy burned when you intentionally work out. You can of course increase this. For professional athletes this would be much higher. While it is pretty straightforward how you can improve the exercise activity and the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the one focus here would be the basal metabolic rate. Your basal metabolic rate can be calculated with a formula such as the Harris-Benedict formula. This is also the one that I use when I do nutrition plans for my clients, and the Harris-Benedict formula takes into account your age, your weight, and your sex, and then you need to do some math, and then you have your basal metabolic rate. This would be your basal metabolic rate if your body is not suffering from metabolic adaptation. This is very important to mention. There are also some online calculators. I'm going to link one down in the description that help you calculate your total daily energy expenditure, and there you can also choose from a variety of physical activity levels, and then what these calculators do is that they multiply your basal metabolic rate with a type of physical activity level depending on what you chose from, and then it gives you your total daily energy expenditure. Before I move into the metabolic adaptation, a brief mention of why age is so important. People of all ages are trying to lose weight if they find themselves at an unhealthy place, but for people that are between the ages of 40 and 60 or even older, they are at a worse starting point than you are, for instance, if you're in your 20s. This is mainly because metabolism starts slowing down due to a variety of factors. One of those is a gain of fat mass and loss of lean tissue, loss of muscle mass. Fat mass is not really highly metabolically active, while muscle mass is the most important determinant of your resting energy expenditure. This is something that has been known for decades. According to all of the sources that I found, they all did show different calories, so that was kind of inconsistent and not very nice. But in terms of ratio, muscle was always said to burn 2 times more calories at rest than fat mass. The loss of muscle mass is partially due to a decline in the physical activity for older people. This could be due to lifestyle factors, but also physical impairment, injuries. Generally, older people suffer a bigger decrease in strength than even in muscle mass, around 2 times bigger decrease in strength, so they cannot even perform exercise that effectively as younger people. And for lean tissue to be maintained, there has to be both sufficient protein intake but also a sufficient amount of physical activity, because our muscle proteins are in a constant turnover. Older fibers in our muscles are being replaced by newer fibers, and if we do not supply our body with these sufficient building blocks, and if we do not stimulate our muscles, it is not going to build new muscle fibers. Of course, the entire situation looks better for older people that are regularly physically active. They do not suffer these large declines in strength and muscle mass and all of that compared to older individuals. But again, not all older people have the same mobility. However, enough about this. I just wanted to mention that not everyone is at the same starting point when talking about metabolism and weight loss. Moving on to metabolic adaptation. Here, as to give you an idea of what that is, I'm going to use a paper that I even used for my bachelor's thesis. It was done on participants in the American TV show called The Biggest Loser, and they did a 6-year follow-up on the people that participated in these contests. For people that have not watched this, I myself included, I have not watched this as well. This is a TV show where people compete as to who can lose the biggest amount of weight, and there is of course some type of money prize at the end of it. Here the researchers found that the people who maintained the greater grade of weight loss also suffered from larger metabolic adaptation, and also a lot of the people that participated had regained a lot of the weight that was lost in the process, unfortunately. These types of TV shows, we have a similar one in my country right now. I think it could also probably the same format, but it's translated to different name. However, usually there are some a bit of extreme strategies involved that lead to greater weight loss more quickly, and these strategies cannot be maintained in real life because you are not anymore in this isolated environment. It's completely logical, and some of these strategies can lead to a bit of a metabolic adaptation. Metabolic adaptation happens when one has cut their energy intake by a huge amount way too quickly. This is because our bodies are very good at surviving, they're very good at adapting. That's why we've made it this far, and we did not always used to have food readily available to us at all times. These were not the natural conditions for humans and are still not the natural conditions for everyone in this world. We need to keep that in mind. And for these people that do not have food availability of all times, they do not have this privilege, their bodies need to survive somehow. So they slow down the metabolic processes so that they can survive even when they have to skip a meal for maybe half a day, even maybe sometimes for multiple days in a row. Therefore, this is a very efficient mechanism, and your body cannot really differentiate from you being starved because you just do not have access to food right now, and you starving yourself because you want to lose weight for summer. At the moment you start eating somewhat higher than this extremely restrictive diet that you were doing, your body at this much lower maintenance calories can now gain weight much more quickly and much more efficiently. There are also some hormonal changes that are related to metabolic adaptation, and they involve a few of the main hormones called leptin, ghrelin, and cortisol to some extent. Leptin is the hormone that is synthesized in our fatty tissue. It is also one of the main factors that determine our satiety. Higher plasma levels of leptin also means higher grades of satiety. Low levels leads to greater hunger. For people that are undergoing some type of energy restriction, leptin levels decline, not only because of the fat mass, they generally decline, they are related to the energy intake. Leptin levels, according to this one paper, declined by 44% in the participants in the study when they were put on 50% of their maintenance calories as a caloric restriction. This is a very severe caloric restriction, and you see how the body responds very negatively to that. The second hormone that comes into play is ghrelin, and this is the hunger determinant. It is related to how much energy we give our body. So if we feed ourselves more, then we have lower levels of ghrelin, and this is the hormone that is being secreted for meal initiation, for us to go and have our next meal. Ghrelin levels, logically, when we are put in an energy restriction, are higher because we're not giving our body that much energy. On the topic of cortisol, generally being in a caloric restriction, especially if it is extremely restrictive, is going to lead to higher stress levels, both psychologically and physiologically. Also, if the energy deficit is being driven by extensive exercise, that on its own is also going to lead to higher cortisol levels, and higher cortisol levels can lead to impairment of the loss of fat mass, so it stops you from losing fat. You see how your entire system is starting to play against you when you are trying to lose weight in a very unhealthy manner. This is also where the entire idea of diet breaks and refeeds kind of starts coming into play. It is to inhibit these negative metabolical and hormonal changes in our body, especially with the idea of refeeds. According to this study that was done on postmenopausal women, they were put at first in a caloric restriction regime. After giving them their maintenance calories, increasing their energy intake for around 10 days, then their leptin levels were restored to baseline. The same goes for this other study that was done on obese women. After a week of them increasing their calories, after doing some kind of a caloric restriction regime, their leptin levels again increased significantly. This is positive because leptin levels have also been found to correlate with one's energy expenditure. So lower leptin means lower energy expenditure, higher leptin is correlated with higher energy expenditure. The entire concept of refeeds is exactly the same. You start increasing your calories gradually up to your maintenance in order for you to increase your metabolic rate without gaining a lot of fat mass in the process, and also to avoid these negative changes in the hormonal levels. The thing about refeeds is that you do not see anywhere specified where do these calories need to come from, and this is where I believe the biggest issue comes in with the entire concept. There were no legit studies when I wrote in PubMed just refeeds. It was only in this other paper about athletes and different metabolism strategies where I found some studies as the two ones that I mentioned right now. So there is not that much scientific data backing just refeeds as you take it, just increasing your calories without any specification as to where do these calories come from. For diet breaks, there is a bit more data that I found, but it is again very mixed. The diet breaks concept is that you would not have a continuous caloric restriction. You might take a week of a break in between where you're just eating your maintenance calories. So it's kind of a week of a refeed. They're very similar. You just give things different names. On the topic of diet breaks, I have an entire video where I talk about them, but just to briefly mention for anyone that is not interested in watching the other video, there was one huge study that was done on men this time, and it was with them having a caloric restriction of 67% of their maintenance calories, and the men that were doing diet breaks in between the periods of caloric restriction were better at maintaining their weight loss and did not suffer such high grades of metabolic adaptation as the other men that did not have the diet breaks in between. And this is one of the biggest studies that support this concept. But that does not apply to all of the studies, since for instance there's this other paper on resistance resistance trained females that had a less of a caloric restriction. This time it was 25%, which again, in my opinion, is a bit extreme, but it is nowhere as extreme as 33% as in the previous study. Here, there was no difference between the group that did the diet breaks and the one that just did the continuous caloric restriction. There were no difference also in the hunger reported, and the adherence was the same. I believe that in studies that were positive when talking about diet breaks, the main aspect that led to this outcome was higher adherence of the participants. So if they were put in a more extreme caloric restriction that they would not find it easy to stick to, and to give them a diet break, then of course that is going to help them stick to the next period of caloric restriction. It all comes down to how extreme the strategy is in the first place. You see, the caloric restrictions are just varying a lot in all of the papers. Why did I say that it is so important to say where these extra calories come from when talking about refeeds? This is because the only technically proven strategy to improve one's metabolism is to gain some muscle mass. Because as I already mentioned, lean tissue muscle mass is the main predeterminant of one's basal metabolic rate. And to build lean muscle tissue, you need to consider three things. The first thing is your protein intake. Studies have shown that you require between 1.2 and 2.2 grams per kilogram body weight per day to be able to put on some muscle mass. Putting on muscle mass is a very slow process, and you usually do have some type of a genetic peak that you can reach, and then you cannot go any higher than that in terms of how much progress you can make per month, no matter what you do, except if you take steroids, but this is not what we promote. For women, that peak is even lower because we do not have as much testosterone as men, and testosterone is very important when talking about building muscle mass. The second factor is resistance training. Your muscle does need to be stimulated in order for it to grow, because muscle fibers can break down during the workout, and they are being rebuilt also using the amino acids that you ingested, and then you get more muscle mass. This is the way that it happens. You need to progressively increase the resistance, otherwise it's not going to work. Usually, if you are at a very low physical activity level, you do not have a lot of experience, you would start with some body weight workouts, then move on to resistance bands, and at some point you would require some type of weight. Or if you're into weight training, you know how this works. I don't need to explain it to you probably. The third thing you need to consider is being in an energy surplus. This is also where the diet breaks refeeds comes back in, because you do need to be eating not in a caloric deficit for you to be able to put on muscle effectively. It is very logical. You would require more energy to put on more mass. It could be challenging, because if you're watching this video and looking for ways to improve your metabolism, you probably wanted to lose more weight, and right now I'm telling you to gain some weight. This can be very uncomfortable, but I promise you it's very worth it in the long term. I did try to do something similar this year. It was not indeed very nice in the beginning, because gaining weight for people that are mainly trying to lose weight in their lifetime is not comfortable, especially if it's controlled and this is your goal. Every time I'm talking about this concept, I think about Stephanie Buttermore and then her series about going all in. She used to be a bodybuilder, but she had this uncontrollable hunger, so maybe her hormones were all over the place, I don't know. And then she just started eating as much as she wanted. She gained a significant amount of weight. This is normal because she started eating a lot more than usually. Over time, however, she reached a plateau and she did not gain any more weight, and she even gradually started losing some of it because just her hunger levels decreased greatly, probably because her hormones were now restored. This is a point where you can actually probably start to intuitively eat. Intuitive eating as a concept is very pretty, very nice, but it is is very sugar coated, and people that do suffer from some type of, I don't know, diet induced hormonal alterations, or that have a history with an eating disorder, for them intuitive eating is not as simple as it is for somebody that did not experience these things, because one does not have any proper hunger cues. But it can come to that point that you do have actual proper hunger cues if you take these steps to restore your hormonal levels. I think that was all on the topic of metabolism that I wanted to say. Let me know down in the comments if I missed something, but I believe that was it. It's become quite a long video. Let me know also if you want me to do a video on a specific topic next time. Also, congratulations for making it this far. Now you're officially an expert in metabolism, and I am very proud of you. If you enjoyed the contents of this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can also enjoy the video the next time I post one. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.